probably the biggest chunk for most people on what they're going to pay out, unless you're paid off cash, which good for you, but like that's not a lot of the time.
I call that the unicorn.
Yeah, that's a yeah.
There's so few.
Welcome to the Opposites Unite podcast,
Where we discuss real estate and lifestyle topics,
break barriers,
build connections,
and find common ground.
Let's unite. So a lot of people want to know how much they're going to keep when they sell their house. So we always do a net sheet, but there's just a few things that I think we should explain and detail out, before we jump into that, right?
I think it's important to know before you make a move how much money you're walking into the next home with, right? Or
you have to know.
Yeah.
You have to know. It's important. If your agent's not giving you a net sheet, you have no idea.
Roughly, yeah. So let's break down what you're going to have to pay or how much you're going to walk away with.
For sure. One thing that really comes to mind is the additional mortgage payment. So sellers often see a discrepancy between their online mortgage statement and their payoff amount, right? And the reason is because you pay your mortgage in arrears, which means you remember when you bought the house, you skipped the first month's payment at the beginning of the mortgage?
Yeah.
Well, that needs to be paid back, right?
Well, you're accruing interest daily. Right. So whenever you go to close, they tally it up to the day that you close, and then they make you pay the arrears. Right. So that's what you're describing. Right.
Yes. You have to add back the additional principal and interest back to the payoff amount.
Yeah.
So there's always a little bit of a difference right there. And that's always the first question
and
I
it's
see.
hard to make it right at the close of escrow. They're like trying to balance that out down to the penny, but it's never perfect. Right.
Well, yes, because also that changes for every day. Like if your escrow goes a day long or 2 days long for whatever reason, then that amount increases.
Right.
Because you've had the house another day or two. So
it's hard to know exactly on that.
Yeah, that can't be calculated until actual closing day.
Right. And then out of that, whatever that balance is, if you still owe the original balance, right? So that's what you're going to have to pay off too. Not just the interest accrued over that period of time, but the whole entire balance it's due. That's also probably the biggest chunk for most people on what they're going to pay out, unless you're paid off cash, which good for you, but like that's not a lot of the time.
I call that the unicorn.
Yeah.
There's so few.
Well, I mean, leverage is a good thing, right? If you can leverage it.
It's fantastic.
Paid off is better, but leverage is not a bad thing.
That's true.
Prorated taxes. So that's another big thing that comes up because people don't know that. How do you pay taxes? You pay taxes twice a year, right? You pay December and June. So like that's when they get tallied up, and that's when they're due. They're actually due like a couple months after. But nonetheless, you have to pay your property taxes, and they keep tallying up. So if you have to pay off and you have to turn over that property to the buyer with a zero balance.
Yeah, definitely. But the cool thing is you actually will get a refund from your mortgage company after you close because of any money held in the escrow impound account if you've impounded your taxes.
Right. That's always a good little check.
Yeah, that's a nice little extra bonus check.
Right, where they balance all that out. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lot of numbers, a lot of moving parts that you're doing.
There is, and I think people forget that. They want to know exactly to the penny, and that really can't be done because it's a moving target, that closing date.
And that check kind of comes in good with the supplemental taxes if you have any. Another topic for another day. But yeah, that's always a nice check to get a couple months after closed, right? So yeah, sure. Definitely.
Well, and then one of the largest things that sellers or anyone selling or buying now has to pay for are the commissions, right?
Right.
And I know a lot of people have heard about the recent news of the National Association of Realtors, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that today.
It's a whole podcast in itself.
And then some, right?
Right.
So, I mean, obviously, you've got to pay your agent for their services. So, that's one of the biggest expenses. But I will just say really quickly for those who are wondering about the NAR law. lawsuit. So I've had a lot of phone calls. I'm sure you have had too,
yeah.
of people who say, "Oh, well, how does it feel now? You're not going to get paid to do your job anymore."
Right.
I have to chuckle a little bit because I mean that's absolutely insane that you would expect somebody to do a service for you and them not be compensated for it, right? So the gist of it is basically that sellers are now responsible for their commissions, and buyers are now responsible for their commission, for their agents' commissions.
Correct.
So, like I said, without getting too far into it, it's just been made more fair now. It's
more transparent, right?
Definitely.
Before it was all on the side of the sellers, and then we had to offer it in the MLS, and now it's not that way.
Exactly.
So that's the two biggest key points that I know about, and it's an evolving thing.
Yes.
Right? So,
yes, they're changing it on us every other week. The dates are changing, the contracts are changing and stuff. But what I want to say pertaining to this particular topic, as far as how much a seller is going to walk away with, when it comes to the commissions and all the other details, none of these things are paid for up front or out of pocket. They're all on the settlement statement at the very end. So they come out of the bottom line.
Everybody gets divvied up at the end, right? It
Yes.
just gets cut up, and everybody gets their portion, and the expenses get paid out. The only thing that really gets paid during the on the buyer side, on the seller side, there isn't anything, right?
Yes.
But on the buyers, they had their prepaid, or things that they not prepaids, things that they paid during escrow.
Yes.
But unrelated to the seller.
And then sometimes another thing that sellers can see on their settlement statement is brokerage administration fees. And that's not something that we charge here at Next Home. We have fees, but we cover them for our clients.
Right.
So we don't pass those fees along. Like I know there's another very large brokerage that everyone would know the name of. They charge, I think, like a $275
fee, and
brokerage
that's
fee
not
or
a
something.
fixed fee, even in between those franchises, they charge different.
Yes,
So,
every franchise
yeah.
is different. Like I said, we cover all the costs for our clients, and here at Next Home, we don't have those. So, but that is something that some sellers can see on their settlement statement if they're wondering what that is. It's like a brokerage administration
We
fee.
don't charge here, you and I.
No, we don't.
We can't speak for anybody else.
Nope.
Right, but definitely not you and I.
For sure.
Okay, so settlement fees. So these are the other fees that get paid to escrow, title. There can be a lot of little fees that are added in there. Now, one thing I like to do is I generally will tell people that it'll cost you 2 to 3%. Now, if you get in the all these items that get tallied up, like the property taxes, if you're due for a property tax payment, if your arrears in the mortgage are, then your tally can go higher, right? So that's a percentage. But these other fees, there are different fees in a sheet, right? That we always provide to our sellers that itemize everything out, and it could cost a lot. There could be a big difference in these taxes depending on where you live. So this can vary. So you'd have to. It's almost on a case by case basis, but like with the general thing of 2 to 3% in closing costs, and then have it get a net sheet from your agent to give you exactly what that would look like, so that and then even then it's fluid, right? And it's on part of the month.
Yes.
When in the month you close.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically what you're referring to are the title and the escrow fees, right? So, we can run those. We have, apps that the title companies give us where we can kind of run those really quickly for our clients. But I always like to, have escrow run it as well. Like if I need it on the fly, I can definitely provide that if I'm at a listing appointment to somebody that says, hey, just, give me a ballpark.
Right.
What do you think I'm going to net? And I can give that to them pretty quickly. And I always preface that with, these are estimates. So, I'll have escrow run one that's more fine tuned.
Estimated settlement statement.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
what it always says, because it can't be down to the penny. Because it's moving, right? So you don't know how long you're going to be on the market. You don't know how long you're going to be in escrow. So all these things are fluid. But yeah, these fees, they can come out of, there's government fees. There's the lender is going to charge you to give you a release of lien. They're going to charge you to give a payoff statement sometimes. So there's different fees that can come into place, and every transaction's a little different. But
Yeah,
that's
and
why
there's like a government transfer tax fee too.
Right.
There's a lot of little things, and they kind of seem like junk fees to most people, but
they're due.
they
And you
are.
got to pay them every time there's a transaction. So nobody wants to, but it's just part of the transaction. So the best thing you can do is prepare for it.
Yes.
And then you know what you're going into the other transaction with, and you know what you can buy based off of your budget's going to be very important, right? Based off of what you're going to walk away with.
Yes. And then sometimes there's also a pest inspection fee. So I know, a long time ago, when an agent would take a listing, the first thing they would do is order a termite inspection, and they would have that billed to the escrow that would be paid out at the end, typically seller to pay. I feel like over, the last 10, 15 years, that's kind of changed. Would you agree?
Well, it used to be in the contract that it was pest. I forgot what the long term is for it, but like a pest control and pest and rodent, and it's more formal because they don't like the just termite thing because it doesn't include rodent and other or the little critters. But anyways, that used to be a big thing, and now there's an inspection unless you write that inspection in the contract. So it's a technicality thing from an agent perspective.
Yeah, and I think
that's why it's changed.
I think that's kind of like a thing of the past. I don't know many agents that immediately go do a pest inspection right when they take a listing like they used to.
Right.
But it could be. I mean, if you as a seller is deciding to do that up front or cover the costs, or if in the contract when the buyer writes on your home, if they negotiate that you're to do the pest inspection, then then you could have that as a line item on your estimated settlement statement. I know for us, I mean, we typically will have our buyer do their own pest inspection when they go to do their home inspection, because I think it's more transparent to do your own due diligence during that time.
Right.
So another thing that comes to mind is like the HOA document fee. So that's something a seller always covers. So if you live in a home where you live in a homeowners association, that has to be ordered through escrow. Escrow will order it for you, but you typically will, give them a credit card for the HOA document fee. And I mean, I don't know. I think they're around 500, but
I think every HOA is different.
I was just going to say every HOA is different, but they can get pretty pricey.
And that's probably the only thing that a seller usually has to pay, and it's only in an HOA situation, right?
It is.
Because they have to get that. There's a big, thick packet that gives all the reserves and all the information to the buyer on what the HOA looks like. And that's also the lender might need it because if they have to approve the HOA. So yeah, you definitely have to get that done, and that's something that is paid up front in the escrow.
Makes
Probably
sense.
the only thing that I can think of where the seller has to fork over a few bucks at the beginning.
Yeah, that's the most expensive thing I would think that a seller has to come out of pocket for
Right.
when they go into escrow. Also the biggest surprise, and that's the one I hear the biggest complaints about.
Well, because they have to send a credit card in,
Yeah, and it's expensive.
Yeah. It's like all of a sudden
It can be. But it's their HOA.
Yeah.
Making the rules and making the prices.
It's part of the transaction. It's part of how it works. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So basically the majority of this is all about the net sheet, right?
It is.
And that's where it's all itemized out, at least most of it. There can be other little fees in there, but for the most part, that's where you're going to get the majority of the cost and the fees. Your agent costs are probably the biggest one. Your property taxes, your escrow title, it bundles up to be somewhere between 6 and 8% on average. That's more standard practice. Everything's always negotiable. Some companies have standardized fees, but whatever you can negotiate. But that's really what it rounds about.
Yeah, it is. At the end of the day, I mean, we definitely aim to be as transparent as possible. Want to include as much of the fees as possible, so you don't have any surprises. But it is an estimate. It's an estimate at the end. So we do our best to get that to you. Yeah, exactly. To get that to you. So okay.
All right. So that's what you walk away with after selling your house.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning into the Opposites Unite podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to leave a comment for a chance to get a shout out in our next video. See you next time.